En 1995, Gabriel García Márquez creó en Cartagena la Fundación para el Nuevo Periodismo Iberoamericano. Tras 25 años impulsando el periodismo independiente, ético, innovador y riguroso, ahora somos Fundación Gabo. Somos taller de periodismo. Formamos, inspiramos, incentivamos y conectamos a periodistas de toda Iberoamérica. Somos Premio Gabo. Premiamos el mejor periodismo en español y portugués. Somos Festival Gabo. Celebramos en Medellín el poder de las historias en la mayor fiesta del periodismo y la curiosidad. Somos Centro Gabo. A partir del legado de Gabo, promovemos proyectos de desarrollo social, cultural y educativo. Somos Fundación Gabo. Con camaradería y chéveridad desde el Caribe colombiano, promovemos un mejor periodismo, la creatividad y la memoria de nuestro fundador.
Todos los días escuchamos que el mundo que conocemos ya no es el mismo. Tenemos más información y más tecnología que nunca, pero persisten las desigualdades sociales al tiempo que aumenta la temperatura del planeta y sentimos las consecuencias en nuestro entorno diario. El horizonte parece incierto, pero nosotros creemos que hay un gran poder de cambio en cada decisión que tomamos, en la forma como vivimos y las metas que perseguimos. En el Grupo Bancolombia estamos convencidos de que es posible un mejor futuro. Por eso, hoy renovamos nuestro compromiso para trabajar decididamente por un propósito común, que nos recuerde a los 30.000 empleados de la organización por qué nos levantamos todos los días. Promovemos desarrollo económico sostenible para lograr el bienestar de todos, impulsando que las cosas pasen con prosperidad, pensando siempre a largo plazo, para que podamos vivir con satisfacción y tranquilidad, todos y nadie se quede por fuera. Bancolombia, Banismo, Banco Agrícola y BAM. Sabemos que aunque somos diferentes, tenemos mucho en común. Este propósito es nuestra razón de ser. Refleja eso que nos apasiona y lo que mejor sabemos hacer, reconociendo que lo que nos hace sentir orgullosos de hacer parte de esta organización es la convicción con que enfrentamos los retos de la sociedad. Nuestro propósito también habla de elevar juntos el bienestar de nuestros países con más y mejores oportunidades. Empleados, colaboradores, usuarios, clientes, accionistas. Todos, desde nuestro rol, podemos cambiar el mundo un paso a la vez, teniendo claro que un mismo propósito nos inspira a trabajar por el bienestar de todos. Nos sentimos orgullosos de decir que en el Grupo Bancolombia promovemos desarrollo económico sostenible para lograr el bienestar de todos.
Te invitamos a conversar sobre cómo podemos seguir avanzando juntos en la ruta de la sostenibilidad. Porque más importante que ganar el año es aprender. Más importante que los resultados es la forma en que los alcanzamos, comprometidos con el desarrollo armónico de la sociedad y trabajando para hacerlo mejor todos los días.
Good afternoon, everybody. Really pleased to give you the welcome to this panel of the 8th version of the Gabo Festival. The name of this panel is Innovation and Audience Development for Sustainability. My name is Juan Camilo Maldonado, and I'm co-founder of Mutante, a digital journalism project that aims to engage in conversation with audiences, informed conversations with audiences. Today we have two great invitees to this panel. We have Borja Echevarría. He is the managing editor of País. He leads digital editorial innovation processes in a moment of great change within the paper, the transformation of the whole model of the business model of the paper, from advertisement-based to subscription-based. He has a long experience leading newsrooms. He has his last job as vice president and editor-in-chief of the digital platforms of Univision News in Miami, awarding him many awards for its outstanding quality and narrative innovation. And we also have Renée Kaplan. She is the head of digital editorial development at the Financial Times, and she focuses on the development of new editorial products, experiments with new forms of content curation and distribution, and also develops new ways to monetize digital journalism. Before coming to the Financial Times, she was deputy editorial director of news network France 24 and has worked as a journalist and staff at numerous US media, including CNN, CBS, and the New York Observer. I'm really happy to be here today with you guys because I think that one thing that we have in common is the big question about the public we serve, the audiences we serve, and also understanding how to serve them and then how to make money serving them, because without the money, there's no way we can serve the audiences. So I hope we're going to have these 45 minutes to talk a lot about how are you dealing with the task of understanding your audiences and making that process not profitable, or it could be profitable, but mainly sustainable in the future. Borja, I wanted to begin with you because El País during the pandemic changed the business model of the paper. You were based on a traditional advertising model, and now you turn into a subscription-based model. How has that strategy, that change in the business model, changed the way you are doing journalism? And what are the main challenges that you're facing and that you have faced during these past 2 years?
Okay, thank you, Juan Camilo, and hi, everybody. First of all, I would say, as you can imagine, it sounds like crazy to change your whole business model in the middle of the pandemic. So for me, I've been working as a journalist for the last 26, 27 years, and this probably has been the most stressful times of my whole life as a professional. I remember, of course, as a journalist, 9/11 or the attacks in Madrid in 2004 with 200 dead people in Madrid. And I remember those times as super stressful, but everything was about journalism. Journalism, you knew what you had to do. You were talking all the time with the people that you are so close in your culture. And this was changing the whole company. You had to put people from different backgrounds, from the business side, from marketing, from the newsroom, from all parts of the company, to make common decisions. So we were planning to launch our subscription model after, I would say, months, maybe a couple of years working in this plan. And the date was the beginning of March. So at the beginning of March, we started to listen about what was starting to happen in China, and we started having the first cases of coronavirus in Spain. That I think was end of February. So it was the first big challenge at that time was what should we do? Should we continue with our plans, or should we put everything in standby? So that was the beginning of March, and I think it was by the 15th of March, we were all home. So those calls, we had to make difficult calls with people that were not so used to talk between themselves, though a small group of us had been working for some time. And everybody at home for the first time. I mean, I would say 95% of the newsroom didn't know what was Zoom in February. So aligning every piece of the company to make that call was super, super stressful and super challenging. As you can imagine, there was a lot of tension, people with different opinions. Not everybody agreed in what way we should go, what path we should take. And finally, I would say like mid-March, we decided that we wouldn't launch the subscription project until the beginning of May. You know, if I look back, I don't know if that was the right decision. Probably if we had launched in March, we would have right now maybe 20,000 more subscribers, maybe we would have a lot of people angry, maybe, I'm not so sure. But that was the call we made. We waited for 3 months. And when we launched in May, we decided to launch the paywall, but not a complete paywall. I mean, we are in a metered paywall with 10 articles for free during 1 month. So we decided we were launching the paywall, but everything around the coronavirus would be open. And it was like that, I would say, like for 2 or 3 more months. And since September, we decided to close or to put under the paywall most of the content, except what we understand as service journalism. Those pieces of content, not long stories, not features, but those stories that would help people in their normal lives. And that part of the content is still for free for everybody at El País. No? So I would say the most challenging part of launching our subscription model was the tension in between the teams, no? And trying to bring everybody together to one decision. And after we took the decision, it was all of everybody's decision. No? So that was tough because everything was so planned. Even we had to change all our marketing campaign. So in few days we had to change everything: marketing, the business plan, how the newsroom was gonna work. We had a lot of stuff, a lot of good content prepared for the first month. So we changed all our plans, no? And then the part and the challenges of working at home, that we're still dealing with those challenges. I would say, looking back, I think we have done much better than what I had thought at the beginning. Most of all, the biggest challenge was still dealing with the print edition of the newspaper. If we were just a digital company, I think the challenge is much smaller, but still working in those two rhythms, though many times we define ourselves as a digital first newspaper, and many of us do, the reality is that this is not so true for so many companies, beside all what we say in this kind of conferences. So we're still dealing with that stress of working in two different rhythms. So I would say these have been the main challenges.
I'm really interested on going a little bit more into detail on how the way you plan and develop journalism strategies is being affected by the model, but we'll go back to that question after we introduce Renée. Renée, you are the head of a digital development of a paper that is a referent in Europe because you guys have a model, a subscription-based model that has been successful for a long time. Right now, you have more than 1 million subscribers, if I'm correct. And I understand by listening to a couple of interviews that you gave in the past that your challenge right now is actually going to that 1 million subscribers and understanding who they are, how they behave, where they are, how they consume news, and develop solutions that make the business model grow. Could you tell us a little bit more in detail, like which are your main missions and plans on right now?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me, and thank you especially, Juan Camilo and Borja, for speaking in English. I'm the only one here who doesn't speak Spanish, and I'm sure we're being watched by many Spanish speakers. So it's gracious of you to accommodate me. I'm really delighted to be part of the conversation. So the interesting thing about the Financial Times today is that because we have had a subscription model for a very long time now, in sort of digital transition years, for nearly 20 years, we have a business model that's already quite tested and proven, and that kind of radical, difficult, complex shift that Borja was describing having to do in these conditions, we did a long time ago. But what's interesting is that, the challenge never changes for sustainability, right? And I think it's a really good word that you use, Juan Camilo. And that challenge is great. So we have 1 million subscribers. Now we have to keep them, and we have to continue to acquire them. And the really big shift in business strategy that is, of course, then reflected in editorial strategy and development strategy is shifting away from prioritizing acquisition, new subscribers, towards retaining the ones we already have. And that's actually not an easy thing to do. It seems like when you don't have them yet and you're still discovering a paid for model, that getting people to pay is the hardest thing. And it is. But getting them to pay again is possibly harder. So a lot of what we're thinking about, and a lot of what I'm prioritizing in terms of digital strategy, is thinking about how do we get to know and keep the users and subscribers we have? How do we really understand what they value? How do we understand what they value, and then continue capitalizing on that? So a couple of the things that I'm prioritizing. So I work across a lot of our digital only formats. I look after all of our audio, and so podcasts. I look after all of our newsletters. Essentially anything that didn't used to be text, that didn't used to be print, is something that I look after. And none of these formats are wildly innovative anymore. Podcasts have been around for a while, especially in the English language world. It's been quite a big deal now in the US and in the UK for, I would say, at least 5 years. Likewise with newsletters. I mean, email in some ways is the oldest technology, although newsletters are coming back with a force now, precisely because they're so useful and powerful at engaging and keeping people you already have. So really prioritizing, this sounds very unsexy, as does keeping the people you already have sound unsexy, but understanding how to get the most out of the formats, the digital formats that we know work, really getting every bit of retention and loyalty value out of them is actually a hard thing to do. And that's one of my major priorities. Sort of like, once you have a relationship going, once you're committed, once you're married, how do you stay married? How do you reinvent that? How do you stay loyal, and how do you keep sort of delight and commitment going? It would be much easier to start from scratch and start over, but you can't. And so that's the kind of sort of focus on understanding how to optimize the technology and the formats you already have, and whether you are. And then the other thing you can do with formats, digital formats that work, is learn a lot about the people who are using them. The more they work, the more you know about them, the more insight you have about user behavior and preferences, the stronger the relationship you have with those users, and the more you can ask of them, even if it's just basically, what do you want? Do you like this? The more you can feel like they'll be wanting to give because they feel like they're getting. And the more then you can understand about, all right, well, what does need to come next? What do I need to be thinking about 1 year, 3 years, 5 years down the road? I'll give you an example. Audio has, as I mentioned, in the English language world, and I think to some extent in the Spanish language world, although I'm much less familiar with it, it has exploded. Podcasts are enormous. But along with podcasts, there's now also the beginning of voice-activated interfaces like Alexa, give me the news. I don't know if Amazon is widely distributed, and Amazon's Assistant is widely distributed in South America, but this is the way that increasingly we're getting a lot of our content, and it's all audio and voice. So users are increasingly getting used to consuming content through voice. So I have podcasts today. I know how they work. I can learn a lot about my listeners, but how do I need to be thinking about audio for tomorrow when more and more of the way users and our subscribers are interacting with content is going to be through voice? So we've decided to experiment with a different kind of audio briefing. It's not a podcast. It's not a show. It's actually one short audio update that is voiced with a synthetic voice. It's text to speech. And instead of publishing it as a podcast, we're actually distributing it on Telegram. And we haven't launched it yet. We're still developing the format, but that's the plan, right? It's like, I know a lot about the habits. I know about the format. What needs to come next if I anticipate how my subscribers are going to behave?
Yeah.
And the third, and one last thing, the third priority, Juan Camilo, you mentioned it, is really thinking about new formats, new forms of engaging with our journalism. How do we monetize those formats?
Well, it's amazing listening to you. Of course, when you're in Colombia and you still have like a long way to go in terms of technology penetration, everything sounds like even like science fiction. But I do relate with this objective of retaining like the most loyal people, and actually like creating, of course, for you, creating a community of loyal people out of 1 million people is quite a bit for me. I'm a small startup. I'm just building a community from scratch.
Yeah.
But I also guess, and because I talked to Borja a couple of days ago, I know that also in El País, they are shifting from understanding the strategy to just gain clicks and views in a massive rate, and turn it into how we give good quality journalism to our most loyal readers. Could you develop it a little bit more, Borja, on how has that changed the way you think of journalism and the results that you are getting out of thinking of giving journalism to the most loyal readers so they are retained, as in the Financial Times strategy?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like the kind of shift that is radical from one point to a completely different point, because El País has always been, the values of El País, the journalistic values have always been like high standard values. So we never really played to something that we should regret right now. But I would say a but for, I don't know, for the last years, not the last couple of years, but maybe maybe a little bit before, the big priority of El País was to go digital and to go big and to go global. El País, as you know, Juan Camilo, and it has always been a newspaper with a lot of footprint in Latin America. It still is, and it wants to be even more. But having that opportunity, the capacity of El País to grow is maybe bigger than for others in smaller markets, for an Italian newspaper or for Le Monde, for Corriere, whatever, no? So there was a purpose of going big, and the newsroom adapted that objective and that idea, and the way the processes and the way the newsroom was working was very much focused on getting a lot of audience. And even if your culture is based on quality journalism, when you go through that path, you are always going to find big risks. And those risks, even if you try not to fall on them, it happens. It happens. So going to a different business model and to a subscription-based model, I think the newsroom is embracing very quickly this new model, talking much more about loyal readers, subscribers, and we feel more comfortable in saying no to certain things and focusing much more in things we want to do, and we want to spend more time executing and elevating the quality. So we have only been it's now 7 months since we launched, but I am seeing in the newsroom like a quick change. I mean, it's also risky. Because for a newsroom like El País, it's easy to go back to the old times. No, that's very easy, because if you're talking about now it's only about subscribers, loyal readers, the temptation is it's gonna be, okay, we are gonna do what we have always been doing, and what we have always been doing is mainly what we have been doing for the print. So I find that even if we all like this new model, we're going to face some challenges that generate tension with innovation and with going much more digital. So yeah, we are very much at the beginning. I am pretty optimistic of navigating those pressures from going to this model, and at the same time remaining innovative. But we have a long way to go. I mean, when I listen talking about the Financial Times, that they have been 20 years already, I mean, I'm pretty jealous, of all the path they have already gone through. But yeah, this is what it is. I mean, El País and Spain has been like a very strange market in Europe. I think we are the last country moving to a subscription. I mean, Italy, Germany, France, and we have been, for different reasons, we have been very late moving to a subscription model. But I think it's gonna move very quickly. The first month they have been pretty successful, much more than we expected. So it's a good starting point.
Of course. Borja, you are also a wizard of like good quality viral digital journalism. You have done it in the past in Innovación many times. You won a lot of really good important awards. And one idea that it comes into my mind is that a person like you, who's like a really good like publisher and editorial creative, journalistic wise, has the capacity to develop innovative narrative journalism and digital journalism that has the potential to be viral, and being a really good journalism, being viral. And like the piece that you showed to me a couple of days ago about this infographic of how coronavirus spreads, I wonder if you have any conversion strategy that actually gets people from that viral piece to the subscription model, to get a subscription. Is that something that you design and that you care for? And how does that conversion strategy work in El País?
To be honest, really, it's. I would say we are in the process. When I'm thinking in that kind of pieces, like that infographics that went really crazy. I don't know how many uniques has already generated for El País. We are not still in that moment where the editorial creativity gets together with the marketing proposition, with the subscriber in mind. We are reacting right now in real time. And as I said at the beginning, it has been very complex to build a coherent strategy with all the different teams of the company being at home, no? So I'm gonna speak very honestly about that piece. That piece is a pure editorial piece that is the mix of a lot of talented people. And when they were building that, no one was thinking about the business model.
Yeah.
The business model. When we launched that piece, that we launched it first in Spanish and then in English, and it exploded. Like, I think it has like 12 million uniques in Spanish and 15 million uniques in English. Then we started reacting from a business perspective. So then I had the marketing people, Borja, what can we do with this? And I had the newsletter team, hey, what is going on? What can we do with this? So I'm speaking honestly because I think this is how we work in most of the newsrooms that are starting to move, to change the path. I'm sure Renée works in a completely different way. I'm sure I'm going to work in a completely different way in 6 months.
Yeah.
Because what I like about what has happened with this piece and with other pieces is that this is helping us to change the structure of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, we reacted afterwards, but now I'm having conversations with the marketing team. Hey, this is not scalable. No, we need to build teams that talk to each other before we do this kind of stuff. So we need to have a plan that is previously to whatever happens after. You need to plan, no? So that's where we are. And I'm not a business person, as I guess Renée was not 10 years ago. I'm managing editor of my newspaper. Probably in my newspaper, I'm the one that has the most digital experience, but from an editorial point of view, I've never worked in this kind of subscription models. So, and I understand that these kind of projects, they are team projects. It's not about me, like right now going and, okay, I'm gonna learn a lot, I'm gonna lead the whole, and it's not about that, no? I think you need to have the personality or the understanding that these new models need a completely different way of working between the teams.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm learning about these kind of projects.
Renée,
Can
go on because I know. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, no, can I add something to that? So Borja, I mean, it's, first of all, I want to, salute you for your honesty, and then some interesting words that I think can potentially be of comfort to you and to everyone listening. That question that you asked Juan Camilo about, all right, you have a big opportunity, it drives all this traffic, we are understanding a little bit better how to do it, sure, that infographic was not planned to do that maybe fully, but wow, is it amazing? I don't doubt for a second that just a simple idea, like translating it into English, was genius, right? Like sometimes the best innovations are not sexy. They're an experiment, and they happen to work. But what I think is that the comforting piece of this is that question of like, how do you capitalize on opportunities, whether they're planned or whether they're sort of unexpected and surprising, like viral. We, even though we've been more than experimenting, we've been refining a paywall model and conversion models for years now. We have only just this year formally started experiments with how do you capitalize on a big traffic driving event. Because it's complicated. It's new ways of working. It's alignment between parts of a business that traditionally not only didn't speak to each other, were encouraged to not speak to each other. It's overcoming taboos about whose job is whose. It's also understanding actually that thinking about huge news events or great, brilliant editorial ideas as business opportunities is not taboo. Actually, it's very much, for better or for worse, part of what journalism probably is going to increasingly be about today. So we, as I mentioned, only formally concluded our first experiment around that with the US election, where it obviously is a huge traffic driving event for us. We have a couple interactive elements that are particularly traffic driving. And we know this now because even since I've been at the Financial Times, which is only 5 years, I've already covered 2 elections, and we know what pieces drive the traffic. It's the poll trackers and it's the results interactives. And we finally sat down months ahead of time with some marketing teams, a product team, and editorial teams to think about what we could do. And it wasn't a complex idea, but it was a complex procedure to formalize the way that we would decide who are we targeting, with what kind of content, what is the objective, what do we actually want to try to do? Do we want them to come back? Do we want them to consume more content? Do we want them to convert? You know, we're an extremely premium subscription. That's a nice way of saying we're really expensive. So if you came and clicked on us for the first time to look at the poll tracker, you're probably not going to pay the price that we cost. So what can we offer you instead that's going to at least incentivize you to stay or come back? These are all things that we had to sort of figure out and define, and people aren't always in agreement about what is the most valuable thing or what is the right opportunity or what we should do. What we did do, just so you know, is we decided that there was no way that someone who was clicking through maybe for the first time or the second time, as was the huge proportion of the anonymous traffic that came in for those pieces of journalism, we knew that they would never subscribe. So we wanted to at least have them sign up or register for something. So we had a newsletter already that was about US politics. If you're clicking on the poll tracker around the US election, you're probably interested in US politics. It is normally, like all of our newsletters, only for subscribers, but exceptionally, we allowed new users who had clicked on the poll tracker to be able to sign up to this newsletter for a limited period of time. So we thought, great, you'll come, we'll offer you something terrific and irresistible for free for a limited time, you'll sign up. And it was a pretty good idea, but we didn't have the technology to sign up. We didn't have the technology to make it free to read. We didn't even have the technology to understand how to offer you something different if you didn't want to sign up to the newsletter. We had to develop all of that. So yeah, it took months of planning for what sounds like a very simple experiment.
Yeah, and one thing that I listened to Borja being like 100% journalist and not still like getting into this business neurosis that Renée is already into all the time. And I also wonder, like, there's a lot of ethical discussions that we're gonna have to keep like moving forwards in terms of how can we deal with the fact that we have to do good journalism in the first moment, but also that journalism has to produce money, and how that quest doesn't contaminate the ethics and the mindset of serving the public in its first place. Is that something that do you have any kind of those discussions in your newsrooms now that you are going into that model?
We do, and I'll talk very briefly because I'm very curious.
Renée, you can go first.
I'm very curious what the mood is like in Borja's newsroom, because it is at a much more probably volatile moment.
Yeah.
One of the rules, to some extent, that we have, even though it's an unspoken rule, but it's something that I feel very strongly about. I was the first person in the newsroom to be actively working with audiences and using data. My rule is I never talk about money and I never talk about conversions. What I talk about is delivering value and deriving value. Are we really understanding all that we can be doing as journalists and as reporters and as editors to be delivering as much value as we can so that we ourselves can be getting the most value out of our work, and really thinking of it as a relationship, almost an exchange of value, where what I want to know is that the greatest number of people possible who might get value out of my journalism are actually getting it. So how do I do that? And that is, in any case, a proxy or the equivalent for engagement and retention, and hence for monetary value.
Borja, do you have like what's the atmosphere in your newsroom?
Yeah, I was saying before that El País and most of the Spanish newspapers were late in moving to this subscription-based model. The good thing of being late is that you have a lot of people to learn from, and a lot of experience there, so it has something good. I mean, we are right now in the process of thinking, I mean, we are not in the newsroom like many other newsrooms. You can imagine El País newsroom with those chart beat panels, with page views, uniques, blah, blah, blah. And that was the kind of data panels that the newsroom had when they left in March. When we go back, probably in mid-January, end of January, I think those panels should look totally different. And there comes the debate. What should we show to the journalists? And there are different opinions. I think we have to be very, very careful, at least in the beginning. I have spoken with a lot of colleagues from different newsrooms all over the world, from those kind of newsrooms that they send an email every week with the people that convert more. Or other outlets that they don't show that data to the newsroom. I think we're gonna change completely the panels, but I think we're gonna go slow. I think it's super delicate for a newsroom with our culture to be too open. I think you have to speak a lot I think you need to agree with the newsroom right now. I think it has to be, though, from a leadership point of view, you have to lead and you have to show the path. But I think in this moment, with so many complexities happening and with the difficulties of communication to the whole newsroom, I think we have to go really, really slow in showing too much. And and I agree totally with Renée. I mean, talking about money. I mean, we never spoke about money, never, because there was so much money. So it was not part of the conversation. I mean, the business, at least for a newspaper like El País, or for like the Financial Times, not for so many newspapers in the world, but it has been like a huge, huge business. Maybe even with the crisis of 2008, 9, 10, maybe we have had like 2 or 3 bad years, but it has been really a very strong. So journalists in our culture, in El País culture, they don't speak much about money, conversion, business model. I have always been very surprised being and working with journalists, and I don't know why this is. I don't know how it is at the Financial Times. Well, you're more like a business newspaper, probably it's different, but there's not much conversation in our newsrooms about business models, very, very little conversation, even very little knowledge. So for me, this has always been quite surprising. As you said, Juan Camilo, I mean, I'm very editorial, but I have always care about what is going on in the industry. I always care. I love reading about the industry, but in our culture, it's not so common.
I want to go back with a question about the audiences. In Mutante, we have cared a lot about like who our audience is. Like we have a permanent conversation with them in a very one-to-one relationship. We build small communities of conversation. Our journalists actually like know the names and the last names of a lot of our readers. I would like to know like what are the processes of getting to know your audience in your newsroom, and beginning with Renée, which tools are you using? Which type of data? Is it quantitative? Is it qualitative? What kind of decisions are you making with those with that data? Could you tell us a little bit of how you get to know your audience?
Yeah, sure. I mean, for no other reason than that's the very first thing that I started with. So, as you, when you introduced me, I started, I've been at the Financial Times for 5 years, but my very first role there was a role that never existed until I came along. And frankly, it's a role that didn't exist in most newsrooms until 5 or 6 years ago. And that was head of audience engagement. And the first thing you do is, as Borja was pointing out, you go slow. Culture changes slowly. It takes the time that it takes. It takes a certain incompressible amount of time for people to begin to understand, especially journalists, at legacy illustrious media like El País or the Financial Times. It takes them a long time to understand why it is they need to be doing anything different. But one of the aspects that I think is really deeply incentivizing to all journalists is who's reading me or who's watching me or who's consuming me. Everyone, journalists are very self-interested in a way, right? They can be selfless and in public service, but they still want to know how many people read me, who read me, was it the right people, am I making an impact? And so the very first way we started talking about why data could be interesting, and then I can tell you a little bit about what data and how, was to try to help journalists understand the value of data to them personally. It's understanding what's been the impact of my work. I want to know, we're all very vain, right? And, and in a traditional time, if you worked for a legacy print publication, the people you were writing for was one person, the editor-in-chief, and, maybe your mother or father. And for the most part, you didn't have the privilege even of knowing any more about who else was reading you. So that's the second element that I really tried to introduce in a narrative around data was it's an unbelievably enabling and empowering and quite inspiring strategy or reality to be able to know so much about who's reading you, even if it's only just the number of people, the time of the day they're reading you, the ways in which they're finding your stories, whether it's directly on the homepage or through social media. And lastly, which are the topics that you write about that are most popular. So those are kind of the key basic metrics of understanding the impact of my journalism. And at the FT, we're very fortunate because one of the reasons it's actually a slightly, it's a chicken or egg question. One of the reasons we have a successful paywall and business model with subscribers is because very early on we had very good data and we had a very forward-thinking head of data and analytics who understood and was able to make our managers understand, our commercial managers understand the value of developing data as a tool. It also maybe because, because we had a very commercially driven business from the very beginning, that we had to, like any brand or any consumer business, understand data quickly. But the fact is that we had the huge advantage and luxury of having in-house data resources that are fantastic. So we have our own proprietary dashboard called Lantern. And it was actually a dashboard that I developed with journalists in the newsroom and a dedicated product team who lived in the newsroom. And so the way it delivers these metrics are in a way that actually speaks journalist. So instead of saying, retention rate or conversion rate, and these are things that you have in Chartbeat, and Chartbeat's an amazing tool, but we wanted to make something that was more journalist tailored. So we talk about quality reads. We talk about where in the world was my story read. We talk about a broadcast schedule, which is similar to a broadcast journalist, to understand what time of the day I get most of my readers.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about data in a way that immediately translates to what does this tell me about my story and how I can relate to the readers of my story. And that's all we have for now, but it is entirely quantitative, to answer your last question, Juan Camilo, because actually quantitative data is what is most immediately dynamic. It's what is the most fresh and the easy to access and the easy to make available. Qualitative data is fantastic, but it's hard to get and it's expensive.
Borja, and you, how are you relating with your readers and how are you getting to know them?
Yeah. First, I want to speak connecting to what Renée was saying, and looking instead of to our readers, looking inside the newsroom. We have just gone through small change in the newsroom, but that tells you a lot about how I think we should look at the audience. Until very recently, all the people that belong to the audience teams inside of the company, they were people that reported to the business side. And those people, they were sending every morning a lot of data, a lot of dashboards to the newsroom, talking about numbers. What happens with that? That many people feel that all those numbers are about business. And for me, the big change is when people start inside of the newsroom start thinking, no, this is not about business, or it's about my audience. It's about my readers. So what we have done is we have split that audience team. It may seem, at least it seems pretty obvious for me. And probably in some newsroom areas like that, but I'm sure in other newsrooms, all the data teams are part of the business side in some newsrooms. But for me, it was pretty obvious we had to do this because it's not about business, not only about business, and it's not about sending a big amount of data every morning to the people with no interpretation, with no connection with the work you have been doing from a journalistic perspective. So, and this has happened recently, only 2 months ago, like putting those teams working much closer, not only with the journalists, but with the content. So, and there, I think, is where the relation with your audience and how you understand the audience can start changing. And I think it's more about who is reading you and not so much about how many people are reading you. That this is where we have been for a long time, no? How many, no? But we know very little about those people, no? And I think now the big change that needs to come is who are they? Where are they? Are they reading us in Mexico, in Madrid, in Barcelona? We need to start getting and not the data people, not the audience, but the newsroom needs to. These are the people that are reading you. So that's I think is the big change that needs to come to a newsroom like ours. And I mean, we use the same kind of tools that at least some standardized tools like Chartbeat, Omniture. I mean, we use all that kind of stuff, and we're building like the new panels with new KPIs. Of course, more around loyalty, frequency. I mean, everything that Renée already has, and that's what we are looking for.
Yeah, that reminds me of a definition of journalism that is used by Jeff Jarvis in the end of mass media journalism. He says that journalism should aim to help people accomplish their objectives. And the question is, who is going to ask the audience whose objectives are? Is the journalist or is the marketing? And I also have the hunch that as long as we journalists go down into the field, not just to talk to our sources, but also to talk to our public, to ask them, how can we serve them better? Yeah, we can be more attuned with what we have, the challenges that we have in the future.
And I think it's for newspapers like El País, Financial Times, or New York Times. It's not as easy as it has been for local newspapers, because they are used. But we define ourselves as global newspapers. It's so difficult to feel the presence of the people, and so many times I have never worked in a local newspaper, and I miss so much. I would love to have that experience of being much closer to my audience and understanding their needs, but the daily needs, and it's not so easy. I mean, and we used to be a national newspaper that had small newsrooms all over the country, but after the crisis in 2007, we started going global, and the local pieces of the newspaper they got smaller. So I mean, we chose a path that it was global, but my feeling is that it's so difficult. I mean, thanks God that right now with the internet and with the data, I think there is an opportunity to learn much more about your audience. But I think as global newspapers and with our global ambitions, it's not so easy.
There's one thing that the Financial Times may help us, I guess. I understand, Renée, that you guys, even though you are a global, massive newspaper with 1 million subscribers, you have a really interesting way of moderating comments and having conversation within the platform. Is that so? Because I would like to know, because listening to Borja, I really believe that one way papers like you guys could get closer to your audience is through conversation, through your own platforms. What's happening in the Financial Times in terms of conversation, and what type of conversation are you having? How are you dealing with polarized conversation, with hate speech, and with all that toxic stuff?
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good question around conversation, because that is now one of the most frequently recurring strategies, words, ideas that's coming up in, I think, among publishers that are at the degree of maturity of their business models that the FT is. So, for example, we have subscribers, they're confirmed, they pay again. And so the big obsessive question then is, how do we give them more value? And how do we get more value from them? And conversation of all different kinds is really seen as being an absolutely key strategy. And I just want one element I wanted to add before answering that question on the data piece is, it really is, data really is about understanding your audience, and indeed understanding what to talk to them about, and how to talk to them, and when to talk to them. It's about understanding audience behavior and preferences and practices. It's about understanding what they actually do versus what they say they want to do, about understanding what they read versus what they presume to pretend to read. But ultimately, it also means using those insights. How do you then inform your editorial strategies? How do you inform what now, data should never lead. Journalist leads, Borja leads, but it should ideally be informed by the data, informed by what you know the behavior of your audience is telling you. And that can inform maybe not absolute commissioning, but that can maybe inform the proportion of a certain topic. Maybe we do more of this because we know our audiences are really getting value from it, or audiences in a particular region that we know we want to target get value out of it. So let's follow that story. Let's stay on that. And maybe this over here, we do a bit less of it. And conversation is a fantastic way to do two things. A bit of that, a bit of understanding more about what gives an audience value. So, for example, we have maintained comments below our stories. Many publications have gotten rid of them. The Wall Street Journal got rid of them. Many larger scale media whose sheer reach made it impossible to moderate have gotten rid of them. We are very committed to comments below the stories because we are a paying media, and our readers have clearly manifested with their participation, but also by telling us that part of the value they pay for in the subscription is the idea of being part of a conversation. Even if they don't join the conversation themselves, they get value out of knowing that they could, or out of reading the conversation, about there being the occasion to interact, about being the very possibility of access to the journalists, of access to express their view, about being in some ways considered members of a community. So those are all the ways in which we think comments and bothering to do the hard work of moderating comments is worth it. A lot of that moderation, which is so difficult, conversation is polarized. And I'll be honest, Juan Camilo, even our readers who, for the most part, our average subscriber is a somewhat older, mostly male, pretty well-to-do, very educated reader, even they can be assholes, if I have to be frank about it. Even they, in a very polarized environment that we are in, can be extreme. They can be very dramatic. They can be very indifferent to the views of others. So, even people whom you know, who are your loyal readers, to whom you are trying to deliver value, might be complex people. So
how do you deal with that?
So a lot of what we've done is very recent. So we don't have a huge moderation team. We have one community editor for 1 million subscribers in the whole world. So that's 3 different time zones. But we have a small team out of our Manila, Philippines production facility, where we have a lot of our production journalists who are a team of about 7 to 8 people who make sure to get rid of the worst comments. They delete them. But the most effective innovation that we did was very recently is we invested in a new commenting platform. And it is a platform that allows us to use a very little bit of AI, so artificial intelligence, to flag up any word that sounds like it might be rude or defamatory or vulgar, or a list of words that we now know reveal potentially volatile or polarizing conversations. Any comments that have those words are automatically put in a list for us to pre-moderate, so to look at before they get published. And what's been interesting is, since we started pre-moderating thanks to this technology, and since we started explaining to readers in every single article how the system works, they feel more safe, and they also feel more watched, and they also feel like we as a newsroom are more involved. And all of those factors, just the factor of a known possible presence, or of one journalist coming in and making one comment, responding one time, that in and of itself is enough to allow the conversation to almost auto-moderate itself. Now, mind you, we don't have to moderate the comments of the whole world. we have to moderate the comments of just that small proportion of our subscribers who are commenting.
Incredible. Well, I think that we have like 4 minutes left. I wanted to end up with a small exercise. We people who lead teams and organizations, we also work with vision. What's the vision that we have for the midterm, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? I'd like to pick up your brains and ask you what's your vision for the midterm future for your own newsrooms? Like, what do you imagine when you see like the newsroom in 5 years, taking into account the problems that you're dealing with right now? How do you imagine El País in 5 years in terms of audience-wise and relationship with the audience, Borja?
Yeah. I mean, the way we have to go, it's so long, no? And you can see right now, and you can see very obviously in this panel, no, between the FT that has already gone through all these processes in terms of transformation, in terms of business stability. What I love of what has happened to newspapers like the FT or like the New York Times is that I don't know how you say in English, it's a círculo virtuoso, that circle where the business starts working, then you start investing in more journalists, then your journalism gets much better. I mean, I think right now we're seeing the best journalism we have seen ever. At least probably in very few outlets, but the quality, it's amazing. So how I envision El País in 5 years? I mean, I envision El País going through that process. And I envision El País clearly with a big impact in Latin America. I think the opportunity we have there, and I'm not talking about big scale, but also about subscribers. When we launched in the month of May our subscription model, that it was launched at the same price in Latin America and in Spain simply because of technological reasons. We couldn't put different prices, and we just changed it like a month ago, and we're very soon seeing we have a big opportunity in many, especially in the big countries like Mexico or like Colombia. So though I'm a journalist, I start with the business side, but because I'm a journalist, what I want is more journalists in the newsroom with more capacity. And when I'm talking about journalists, I am including in that part developers, product people that think strongly about content. Mm-hmm. For me, my biggest fear in going through this process, and I don't know how it was for Renée and for the FT, though she has only been there for 5 years. For me, one of the biggest challenge is technology, because when we talk about all these things you want to do, your capacity of moving fast and that what you have in mind gets executed from a technological perspective, that's like my biggest fear in terms of moving fast.
Because of the costs, why is it a fear?
Well, because I think it's challenging to have like a strong technological strategy. You have different ways to go, like building completely from inside of your company, your technology, or outsourcing your technology. Some companies, they have gone from one place to another one, and for me it's like a very critical point. You may have the best journalism, you may have amazing journalists, but if the rest of the pieces, they don't work at the same speed and at the same quality level, I think that becomes really, really challenging.
Sure. Renée, how do you see yourself in 5 years?
Yeah. Should I go quickly, Juan Camilo?
Yeah.
I think we're almost done. Yeah, I'll go very quickly. So 3 things, I think. One, I won't go into because it's a little bit of what I mentioned before. I do see there being the same fantastic journalism we know how to do. That's what we know how to do best already, but very different formats. I think the way that we need to be thinking about serving our readers differently is less with the journalism than how we can make our journalism fit into their lives. How can we allow it? How can we make our formats, our ways of distributing, be a way that allows our users to consume us more frequently in ways that are most useful to them? So whether it's in their cars, through their speaker, in their phones, in the paper, because the print is going to exist for a while, but it really is more personalization, not in terms of the journalism, but in terms of the ways that they can consume our journalism. I also think it's different roles, as Borja evokes, and it's precisely those bridge roles. Technology is so important, and it is so difficult, not because it's hard to understand, but because it's hard to get the technology people who know technology to speak to the journalism people who know journalism, and to make each other understand what they need most and in what order, and who gets to decide and who gets to invest. Those are procedures and governance issues that sound very boring, but are so important, and they don't exist yet. So I think there'll be new roles, bridge roles, whose role will be to connect. And I think the final point, which I think is absolutely vital, is the governance of our businesses needs to change and will change. We just launched last year what we call our Next Gen board, and it's a parallel board of executives who are all 30 or under, because those are the subscribers of the future. They need to be informing the decisions that, for better or for worse, the 50-year-olds and 45-year-olds and probably still predominantly male and predominantly European people are making the decisions. And so our governance in 5 years of our business, our managers need to look different.
Okay, well, I must admit that I'm gonna want to see this conversation again and take more notes. I really learned a lot on this conversation, and I really appreciate all the exchange that we had. Thank you to you both. It was really an honor to have this conversation with you. And also thank you to everybody that followed this conversation through the Gabo channels. I was instructed to tell you that there's another panel at 5 p.m. It's called the El Lado B de las Historias de las Drogas. It's a panel where all the winners of the grant, the new narratives on drugs grants, would share their stories. So I really recommend that panel. And something else, I also have to tell you that there's going to be activities for the Gabo Festival, Gabo Fest, until 11th of December. So there's still a lot of fun and a lot of things to do. It's a shame that we didn't have the opportunity to see each other in Medellin, but let's hope that after everything, well, we really don't know when's everything going to be back to normal, but let's hope to meet each other one time again. Thank you very much, and good luck to accomplish your vision.
Thank you very much.
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed it.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Good luck.
Bye. Good luck.